morning to everyone who's joined so far, and welcome to another webinar. Today we're actually joined by Michelle and Erica from Bravo Migration, who've just popped their webcams on. So thanks for, I guess, presenting this morning. Yeah, I guess the topic we're going to talk about this morning is all about hiring temporary residents on visas. Now, I guess I'm not sure where you're at if you're joining, what experience you've had with this process, but I know personally we've noticed some difficulties recently. The challenges that COVID give us with this sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's great to have two subject matter experts on to sort of walk us through this stuff. So, yeah, I'm personally looking forward to it for my own benefit, but I hope our listeners are also going to enjoy it as well. Before I introduce you, though, I just want to give you the heads up, and Rose is actually going to pop a link in the chat box about this, but we will be having another webinar. So we've got webinar, we've got tons of them, but we try to keep them super relevant for our clients. And the next one we're having is about the legal challenges of a growing business. So, I mean, when you start out as a business owner, you may not need or think you need certain things from a legal perspective, and as you grow, you may not know that your requirements might change. So, we've got Joanna Oakey, who's been a guest on our webinars before, and she's going to walk us through the things you might need to keep in mind as your business grows from a legal perspective. So, yep. So Rose has posted that into the chat box now if you want to register for that. And I will introduce you to our two guests. So we've got Erica and Michelle, and they founded Bravo Migration in 2008. They're registered migration agents who specialise in assisting Australian employers secure overseas talent. They make the visa process a breeze for both the employer and the employee. Together with their team, they've advised thousands of businesses over the years and assisted with their recruitment and personal issues when it comes to foreign workers. So I'm very excited to have you both on this afternoon. It just ticked over up here in Brisbane. But yeah, I will stop sharing and then pass. Is it, who's first? Is it Michelle?
I'm gonna start. Erica will put the slides up for us, please. Thank you very much for the introduction, Ben. That was great.
And I just want to mention as well, we will be doing Q&A throughout the webinar. I'll be keeping an eye on the questions box or the Q&A box. So please feel free to pop in any questions you've got for Michelle, Erica, or myself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Very interesting topic, a topic that Erica and I personally were super passionate about. This is our lives. We breathe and live this subject. We'll try to keep this as as engaging as possible. So just to give you a quick overview, I'm going to talk a little bit at first about the general aspects and what's going on at the moment with the with the border closures. Talk a little bit about us, but then I'm going to move then to Erica to talk a bit more specifically about the requirements. Again, we're not going to bother you with many technical legalities, but it's at least to give you an overview and to understand the steps involved in securing your overseas talent to your company. And then obviously, as Ben suggested, we're going to have a Q&A and guys, whatever question you have, whether you've done this before and you have specific questions or you're completely new to this and you want to, anything you want to ask, we're here for you. But then obviously at the end also, we will offer everyone that is participating, a free chat, a free assessment to have a chat to us and ask any questions that you want on a one-on-one basis. I think that's where there's a lot of value in that. So, you have an opportunity to pick our brains, right? So without further ado, let's keep going. So thank you, Ben already introduced us. This is great. I always like to touch base on a couple of other aspects of both Eric and myself. So we are migrants ourselves. We were born in Brazil. I've been registered since 2009. Erica has been registered since 2005. Erica actually was one of the first Brazilian Australian registered migration agents. So, she's been in this for a long time. I migrated to Australia in 2002. Erica was 1996. And so it's been a while as well. I'm a citizen of Australia, Brazil, and Germany. Erica, and citizen of Australia, Brazil, and very soon Portugal. And also, guys, just so you understand, Erica is one of the instructors of Legal Training Australia, which is one of the biggest and most reputable CPD companies for migration agents. And the two of us, we've just been selected as well to be assessors for the capstone exam. So the capstone exam is the test that new migration agents need to undertake to become registered. Wow. So yeah, so we're right there with the industry. So as Ben pointed out initially, we founded Bravo in 2008. We've been in the market for much longer than that. I guess the interesting thing about Bravo Migration at this point in time for you guys here is that the majority of our applications and the work we do right now, they are in the employer sponsor world. So we do focus on small to medium-sized businesses. About, I would say, 75 to 80% of the work we do now are in relation to working visas and employer sponsor visas. The other percentage is more into family visas and general skilled migration, which is not the topic that we'll be talking about today. And because we deal with small and medium-sized businesses, I think one of the things that we pride ourselves to is not only on the results, but our capacity to explain and navigate all of the complexities and make it very transparent and easy to understand for our clients on the steps and all the requirements, and also obligations involved in obviously employing someone on a visa to Australia, on a working visa.
And we walk the talk as well, don't we, Michelle? Because we are a small business ourselves, and we've sponsored people over the years. We know exactly what it is to need someone with a certain skill and not be able to find it in the pool of talent locally. And we've given temporary visas to staff over the years, permanent visas. So we provide the legal advice and the service, but we're also being on the other side with you guys, which is being an employer needing to get a foreigner.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to touch base, which is not on the presentation, but just to get things started as well, we do believe that the whole employer-sponsored program is extremely attractive, as long as it is done correctly and strategically in the business. And why am I mentioning this? Because there's a lot of negative talk in the media about how foreign workers, they steal jobs, and how companies employ people on working visas to pay less, which is, look, there will always be dodgy operators out there doing this, but from our experience, 100% of our clients, they're doing the right thing. They have the right strategy in place, and they are coming from a good place. So it's very important that even if you're doing this for only one employee, that the whole strategy and the whole idea of employing someone is part of your recruitment strategy in the long term. You shouldn't be treating this application as simply, I'm going to help that person, or I just want to lose that person. The whole visa strategy and sponsorship strategy has to be undertaken and prepared and created alongside all your recruitment, HR, and team development strategy. If you do that, you will get a return on your investment, right? So I think I really like to touch base on that, because we're very proud of the clients we have. We're very proud of working with everyone that we have on our client base, because everyone that we work with, they come from a good place in terms of strategizing this process. So with that in mind, again, just starting from the basics. So what is a visa, right? I'm assuming that most people, attending the webinar today, they are, either Australian citizens or permanent residents. Some of you might have never had to go through something like this, but visa, it's a legal document that allows a foreigner to not only enter the country, but also remain in the country for a particular period of time. And in Australia, we have three main subcategories of visas. We have temporary visas, as per what the name says. It's temporaries for 1 to 4 years, 5 years, depending on the subclass of the visa. Permanent visas are the ones for people that it's the same as the green card in US. So it's the one that allows a visa applicant to remain here indefinitely, and even depending on the circumstances, or the majority of cases, It would allow them to apply for citizenship if they want Australian citizenship down the track. And then we have the third one, which is the hairiest one, which is the bridging visa. So the bridging visa, it's not technically a substantive visa. A bridging visa is a bridge. So essentially, if someone comes to Australia on a, for instance, a student visa, and they apply for a sponsorship visa with one of you guys, while the application is being processed, that person is granted a bridging visa. So the bridging visa is a legal technicality that allows the visa applicant to remain lawfully in Australia until the application is processed. And this is particularly important nowadays because, again, the processing times, they have exploded. There's a long waiting period. And one of the things that we're going to touch base on is how important it is to take advantage of those people who are in Australia at the moment, even if their visas is running out and then you decide to sponsor them. Even if the application takes a year, the reality is they can already work for you, and they can stay in the country while the application is being processed. So very important to differentiate these three categories. Border closures affect on many businesses. So there's two, as you guys know, borders closed since March 2020 for temporary visa holders. So permanent visa holders can still come back, of course, going through quarantine and paying ridiculous prices on flight tickets, but legally they can enter Australia. But
it's funny you mentioned that. We had an approval last night for an accountant. Yep. So one of our clients is an IT company, and they deal with some software that's got to do with finances. Very technical, as you can tell. I'm not all over it, but we've launched a permanent visa for these accountants they wanted to bring from South Africa. Mm-hmm. And it took 9 months, but last night finally the permanent visa was approved. So that means this gentleman is not subject to border closure. So when Michelle says the borders are closed for temporary visa holders, it means people on student visas, on work holiday visas, on sponsorship visas. But our strategy with this company was to nominate him for a permanent visa to circumvent the border closures and bring him on. So the problem now is for him to find a flight into the country.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we have to kill one dragon at a time, right?
Yeah. And just one question on that. I did see actually on the topic of accountants, there's a Accountants Daily. It's a website almost like a newspaper for accountants. They did say that the rules have changed recently. Is that something that you can cover now?
We'll talk about
stuff, or is that later?
Yeah. And it's very soon actually. It has to do with the PMSOL. I'm gonna cover that in the next 3 slides.
And the reason for which this accountant finally got his visa approved. So Michelle,
I'll touch base on that. Yeah. So in terms of the main the way it affected, at least the majority. And guys, what we're talking about here is not the economy in general, but it's the feedback that we're getting from our clients as well. So it's twofold, right? The first one is workforce participation. And why is that? Because a lot of the applicants that end up being sponsored by companies in Australia and end up being absorbed by the workforce, those are people that are coming here initially not on permanent visas, otherwise they wouldn't need the sponsorship, but they're coming here on other temporary visas, such as visitor visa to a lesser degree, but mostly student visas and working holiday visa makers. So it's not only the farmers that struggle once working holiday visa makers cannot enter the country, it's actually a whole bunch of industries, because these guys, they come in, these skilled workers, they come initially to study or to travel, but then at some point, and depending of course on their capacity to look for a job and enter the workforce. But when they do, and there's a click, and there's synergy between them and the company, that's where the whole conversation of sponsorship starts. And we see more often than not companies saying, look, this person has a particular limitation on their visa. I want to sponsor them so they can work full time for us. So that's how this whole pipeline is built. And what's happening, of course, with the borders closure is not only this new potential skilled workers are not coming in, but we had a whole bunch of people leaving the country as well, especially during the lockdowns. And that in June now in Sydney, I don't know where all of you guys are located, but in Sydney we are in lockdown again. So a lot of people ended up leaving the country. So if I'm not mistaken, I think we had a negative net overseas migration of about between 60 and 90,000 people last year. So it was the first time since the First World War where we've had that, ridiculous amount of people leaving the country in comparison to people entering the country. There's movement, but at the end of the day, we've had, between 60 and 90,000 people leaving more than entering the country. And that's obviously affecting a lot of our clients in terms of sourcing and absorbing stuff. Now that we're back on track with the economy recovering, this is where we need stuff the most, right? And that's where things are becoming super challenging. But I'm talking about workforce. The second element is the economy in general, right? Which is whether they are skilled or unskilled people. The reality is migrants contribute to GDP. They pay taxes regardless of the job they do. They pay taxes regardless of the job they do. They consume. So we're missing on a lot of consumers as well, depending on the industry. You look at, I know that you guys are based in Brisbane. I was in Queensland now, part of the school holidays. I left Sydney before the lockdown. But I have friends that work in the tourism and hospitality industry in Queensland, and they were struggling not only mostly with talent pool, but also things slowed down, right? So depending on the industry, we're all affected differently, but that's the reality. I saw an article, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, where this lady, restaurant owner, cafe owner, based in Tasmania, had to close down the restaurant, the cafe, simply for 2 weeks because she couldn't find staff.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about staff that she would be sponsoring on working visas, nothing like that, just casual staff. And she missed on that simply because there's not enough people coming in. So those are, I think those are the two main aspects, as to how the borders closures have affected businesses. And I'm talking from an immigration point of view, of course. I'm not talking about anything else.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
sorry, I'm keen to actually keep it pretty interactive. Like we spoke about something that might actually be pretty frustrating for some of the people joining, but I'd love to know. So just some industries I can see in our attendees, Michelle and Erica. We've got doctor or medical industry, physio, IT, finance broking. And from our attendees, I'd just love to know, like, what's been some of your biggest challenges, and maybe we'll look at the context of these border closures or COVID, and trying to find people to help grow the business. Like, could you just maybe sort of suggest what your challenges have been, and we might be able to kind of work through that or better understand that to help?
Yeah.
I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah. So from our clients, all the industries that you mentioned, for our client, at least the ones that you just mentioned, for our clients was to actually attract talent. Really, yep. We've got a few people on the pipeline. We've got a few people on the pipeline actually. And if you want to just move to the next slide, because I think this is important because it has everything to do with this. Yeah. I've got one client. I've got a health clinic, and I've got 3 companies in the finance industry as well. They're all bringing people from offshore. Yeah. Right. They couldn't find anyone onshore. They're all bringing people from offshore. So again, it's not all doom and gloom. And this is what Erica was mentioning before. So Australian employers are still able to recruit people from overseas. Obviously, there is an extra underlying risk in bringing people straight from overseas to Australia because you haven't had that opportunity to test the waters before employing that person. But that's where people are getting at this point in time, simply because the talent pool is very, very little. Now, Erica pointed out, in her case, the person got the strategy was, let's do the permanent visa, because back then, 10 months ago, we had no light at the end of the tunnel as to when the borders would open. So the strategy back then was, let's get a permanent visa. It may take 8 months, but once that's done, it's done, and we bring that person indefinitely to Australia. and during this time, Erica, I don't know if it was the case, but the way we're operating right now as well is people can still work remotely, right? So it might have even, I don't know if it was the case, but it might have been the case where the person was actually providing some service remotely. I'm just saying, we have to think outside the box here in terms of strategy. But with the temporary visa holders or temporary sponsorship, and guys, we're going to cover that, the requirements, and talk a little bit more down the track. But just having a helicopter view of how things are placed currently, even if they're granted a visa, the reality is, and as I said, the processing time has exploded. But not only people need a visa, they need to obtain a travel exemption to be able to enter the country. So
if they're coming on a temporary visa.
If they're coming on a temporary visa. So for instance, someone gets a 482 visa, which is the temporary sponsorship valid between 2 and 4 years. I've had a gentleman who's a specialist doctor from Brazil, actually. And he was granted an exemption to enter Australia on the basis that his occupation is on the PMSOL, which is the Priority Migration List. So the Department of Home Affairs, alongside Australian Border Force, they said, you know what, borders are closed. However, for a number of occupations, we understand that these occupations are necessary and they're crucial for our next stage of economic recovery. So we will not only prioritize in terms of processing times, applications or applicants under these occupations, but we will also facilitate travel exemption, right? So we managed to get travel exemption for this doctor. His visa was granted and the travel exemption was granted. But funnily enough, he's got a partner. His partner didn't get travel exemption. So they allowed him in the country, but not the partner. This is how tough the department is playing on this whole travel exemption thing. Can we just go back, please?
Yeah, this is just a couple of examples. So Ben saying the industries of the attendees at the moment with us. So these are a couple of medical occupations that are in this exemption list. So they, even if they are granted a temporary visa, if your business wants to sponsor people in these roles on a temporary visa, they would be able to get an exemption to fly in. Maybe not even that is guaranteed. No. There's some engineering occupations as well.
And I can see software engineer or software application programmers as well. On sorry, I've got the list up actually separate.
Yes.
But is there a physiotherapist, or is that covered under medical practitioners? Oh,
no. Unfortunately not. And we have a client, an occupational therapy clinic, and that's not covered there either. So what we do in cases like that is we still lodge an exemption to travel, but we say, look, it might not be on the priority list, but this is still a health role. This is still in huge shortage, and we try to appeal to their senses. Not anyone can apply for an exemption, any employer in any industry. I have a jiu-jitsu coach at the moment that we're trying to get an exemption because it's a chain of jiu-jitsu gyms and they just can't find jiu-jitsu coaches in Australia. They rely heavily on international students coming into the country and starting to work for them on a part-time basis while they're studying, and then they identify those amazing ones and they offer them sponsorship. At the moment, these people can't come in. So your other clients, there's IT occupations there, hospitality, they included chef and accountants. So that's all what Michelle was mentioning before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I managed to get a right early in the days with the travel exemption, when it was even harder to get exemption. I actually managed to bring a team of 5 technicians for this company. I'm not gonna mention names, of course, for confidentiality reasons, but they were installing a big machinery for an industrial plant down in South Australia, and we did manage to get those 5 travel exemptions, even though they were not on the list. But just the sheer volume of the investment actually allowed them to to be allowed. So
Yes,
what do you guys see on the news actually? And that's what was on the news. I think was last week or on the weekend, saying, well, guess what? There are people still coming to Australia. That's true, right? They just don't paint the whole picture. You need to get the travel exemption. So there are some people that are actually, of great benefit to Australia coming in, other than Hollywood actors, right? So it's not, yeah. So just moving forward here. So again, it's not all doom and gloom. We can try that. Obviously, it's a one-on-one basis. We need to understand what's behind and whether there will be a good chance of success doing that. But there are alternatives here. But also, guys, people that are already in Australia, temporary visa holders that want to extend their stay in the country, and if you have someone that you really like, that you want to keep in your business and you want to sponsor in Australia, it's all going normal. So you can still sponsor that person. Remember, if the person's visa is about to expire, there's the bridging visa. Even if the application takes, say, 10 months to be processed, still that person will be able to continue working for you. The department is accepting applications and processing applications normally. And contrary to what some people might believe, the reality is the refusal rate, at least for us, it's non-existent. We haven't had any refusals since the pandemic started. It's all about putting forward the right application with the right documents and the right submissions, and we can get that granted.
That's a very good point, Michelle. We have some clients who say, okay, I think I qualify to sponsor, I have the right candidate, but how am I going to get an approval and justify to the department that I need a foreign worker now when, there's people losing jobs in the economy and et cetera, et cetera. And that we'll talk about that in the requirements, but that's not a problem whatsoever. Like Michelle said, if we put your business case to the department and show your company in particular, this is not a hurdle.
Yeah. So next one, please. So the next one, I think, is all right. So we've been through the lists, right? So just moving forward then, in terms of employer-sponsored visas, remember, we've got the temporary visas, permanent visas, and bridging visas. The options under temporary visas would be, the 482 TSS sponsorship visa, which is the old 457 that the government one day in 2018 or 17, actually. In 2017, they woke up and said, we're abolishing the 457. No one else can be sponsored. But we're implementing the 482, which is pretty much the same thing with a few twitches, right?
Different number.
Then, yeah, but look, the thing is, the 457 was on the news all the time. So what the government is, let's scrap that out and start with a new number. And people will think that that's something completely new, which wasn't the case. Then we have the 407 training visa. So the training visa is also a sponsorship visa. And this is very, very important, especially to those of you in the health industry, right? I have a bunch of clients in this situation. When you bring someone from overseas, a lot of the health professionals, they have to obtain registration in Australia before being able to work autonomously in their position. So the way we go about that, instead of going for the 482, we go for the 407, which is they're being sponsored by your company, but during that time, which is a maximum of 2 years, they are working and they are going through the process of obtaining their full registration to work in Australia. And then once they get the full registration, we either go for the 482 or the 186. Then we have the 494, which is a regional visa, very similar to 482 as well. And we have the 400, which is a short stay business visa, usually for up to 3 months, and it's only granted from offshore. And so these are the temporary visa options. The permanent visa option would be the subclass 186, which is the one that Erica worked for their accounting client. And then we're going to cover the requirements in more details here. Our main focus will be on the temporary visas at this point in time, but we'll also mention the permanent visa down the track. So the list, we've kind of been through it already. This list is available at the Department of Home Affairs website, guys. So my suggestion to you is maybe just Google it. If you put PMSOL Doha, DOHA, it's going to take you to that page. I think it's worth it saving on your computer because they keep updating this all the time. So Ben, accountant just came into the list, I think was less than a month ago,
Yep.
right? And I have 2 clients already on the pipeline, big financial firms that want to bring some internal accountants to Australia. And we're working on those applications as we speak. As soon as we launch the visa, I'm going to ask for travel exemption, and hopefully we'll bring them over.
Ben just shared the link to the PMSOL. Thank you.
Awesome. Box. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Good.
So I'll hand this over now to Erica, even though she was quite actively participating on my presentation before. I'll probably do the same then.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. So basically what we're saying is that, we saw that the talent pool has been impacted by the non-existing entry of temporary visa holders since March last year. There are some people coming in, but those people are already absorbed by the workforce in the majority. They're already being sponsored. So what we believe are solutions, if your business, you're watching us today, if your business has suffered, if you are struggling to find skilled workers, then you still can recruit from overseas. There's 2 solutions. You still can recruit from overseas and try to get an exemption for that person to come in. And that's what we, when we put those 2 solutions out there, we are more leaning towards the second solution, which is try to find, there's still a large number of temporary visa holders in the country right now who are talented, who are skilled. And there's never been, in our experience, there's never been a bigger movement of sponsored people around. So we're seeing a lot of people going for better jobs, moving for whatever reason. They've got a sponsor A, and they can apply for jobs, and they can transfer to other companies if they're looking for more flexible work conditions or better pay or a different role, and so on. So we are also helping a lot of companies transfer people who were sponsored by other businesses into their own business. And you don't have to be a company that has sponsored people of a number of times to do that. Any company in Australia can start from scratch and sponsor someone on a visa or take over a sponsorship. So we'll cover the most common visas today, which are starting with the 482 TSS. So this is the new 457 visa, which really is just the same with a different name and a little bit of tweaking in the requirements. This is a visa that takes 3 steps. A business needs to be approved as a sponsor to be able to sponsor workers in this visa. Then there's a nomination, which is the approval of the position being offered to that worker in particular, and a visa approval for that worker in particular. So the SBS, the business sponsorship approval, is a blanket approval that will be valid for 5 years and enable businesses to sponsor people over that period. However, every time there's a new candidate, every business, approved or not, needs to go through step 2 and 3 specifically for that person. Now, that SBS approval is also valid for the regional sponsor visa. And when we say regional, we're not just talking about businesses, beyond Whoop Whoop or something. Regional, for migration purposes, is any position, not a business, but any position located outside of Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne metropolitan areas. So if you're here watching us and you're located on the Gold Coast, Cairns, Newcastle, South Australia, those are regional areas for migration purposes, and you could benefit from that because the government really wants to make things easier for regional employers. So that approval is valid for the 482 TSS visa or a regional sponsored visa as well. Now, when we say any business could be approved to become a sponsor, we really mean it. The requirements to get that blanket approval are minimal. You can be a sole trader, you can be a partnership, a PTY, a co-op, any incorporated business that has an ABN can seek approval to become a business sponsor. And again, once approved, that approval will be valid for 5 years.
Even the government can sponsor.
That's correct. Government agencies and so on.
Yes.
So we know a few stories, don't we, Michelle, about, I think Julia Gillard's office used to
had someone in the cabinet who was a sponsor.
Yeah, that leaked during the Gillard years, and they were not advocates of this visa. The 485 visa is the descendant of the 457 visa. The 457 visa was created in 1996 by the Howard government. So it is a liberal government creation, the whole skilled migration program. So labor tends to be vocal against it, but when they were in power, there were never that many visas granted under this program. So they really went for it. But we're not here to talk politics. So any size business, any age business. So we get a lot of contacts from startups saying, I really need to sponsor people to get this funding or get this business going. But I've heard that startups cannot sponsor. Not true. There's no legal requirement that a business must have been trading and operating for a minimum amount of time to be approved. So the business needs to be trading, but we've secured approvals even for businesses that technically were not. So one of our large clients is a restaurants. They are very prominent here in Sydney, but now they're in Brisbane as well. I can't name names, but when they started now there's 2 restaurants that they own in Brisbane. They needed a chef to be there on the first day when they opened their doors. And that chef needed to have work rights at that day. So we had to approve the business even before they opened their doors. So we show things like they had rented the premises, they were refurbishing the premises, they had bought equipment, they had entered into employment contracts. So literally the day after someone register a business, depending on the case, depending on the business plan, we could secure an approval for that business. Now,
and we've had approvals coming through, especially renewals, isn't it, Erica, recently in a couple of business days.
That's right.
Not new applications, but renewals.
This is the quickest step. There's also another myth we see is that businesses and business operators believe that they must be turning a minimum to be able to be approved. That is also not true. I have a startup that we got approved in a matter of weeks, and their turnover at that point had been $90,000. And they, of course, we were talking about, I had to submit a business plan. We showed that there were investors coming, there was going to be a seed investment, et cetera, but they said, sure, and they approved it. The fee for that's also nominal, it's $420. The crux of the matter is this part. So your startup is new, you're not earning a lot of money, you don't even have employees, we can secure that blanket approval for you. Every time from then on, when your business has an employee, we need to really sink our teeth into what position is being offered to that person and why. And this is the core of the 3 applications today. The visa application is all about what that person has. So they have to have the right qualifications, the right work experience. They have to show they speak minimal English. They have to be of good health and character. The government doesn't want to employ, to sponsor any criminals, etc. So that is the individual. So each individual has to meet the requirements of the role. However, your business still needs to explain to the department why you need someone on a full-time role in that position right now. Why now? Where is your business now? So regardless if we've approved your business 3 years ago in the blanket approval, every time there's a new candidate, we need to explain your financial position. That's when, we in a lot of times liaise with accountants directly. The business owner puts us in contact with businesses like Inspire who say, okay, I need BAS, I need profit and loss. I need, a projection of figures for the next few years. So we have to explain the position of the business, financially speaking, at this stage. If the business is not doing that well, but there's future growth, there's future positives, we also go there and explain. And sometimes that candidate you're sponsoring is the reason why there will be growth. If it's a salesperson, if it's a marketing manager, if it's an engineer who will have to deliver the service for this new client you signed up, if it's the physiotherapist who will be able to treat your clients in a new location that you're just leased, then we explain how that candidate either will make the growth happen or will have to fulfill what's happening in terms of that growth.
And it's important to mention as well, Erica, that we need to explain anyways, even if you are a restaurant and you're sponsoring a cook.
Yes.
You have to explain that as well. So
yes.
You can't simply, there's no space to be allowed to allow case officers to make an assumption on your business. It's very important at this stage that everything is super transparent. So they expect you to explain.
The onus is on the business via their migration agent, us, to explain details. We can't depart from the premise that the case officer will understand the business, the nature, the structure, and even when it's something obvious, like what Michelle just said, we have to explain why businesses need more chefs, for example. So, but that's what we do and what we love to do. Yeah. So any offers that any business makes to any foreign workers needs to be of a minimum salary package of 54,000 plus super per year, unless there's caveats. So some occupations like marketing manager, the minimum offer needs to be 65. Management consultant, 90,000. Recruitment consultant, 90,000, and so on.
Jeez.
But mainly the majority, 55 is good to go. Now, when I say 55, why do I say that? Because the minimum is actually indexed and it's 53,900 plus super. However, we also need to show that that person is earning what's called market salary rate. So we need to show if there's an Australian undertaking the same role in the same business and location, the foreign worker needs to be earning the same. If there isn't an Australian in the business, we need to do market survey salary research. Why are those two things, those two requirements there? The minimum salary package is to protect Australian salaries. So the government doesn't want a company being approached by a foreign worker saying, pay me 30 grand to do this job and I'll do it. It's just because I really need a visa. I don't want to go home. And then that would start bringing the salary market down. So that's the minimum. And of course, to protect that person from being exploited. But the true protection for Australians is on the market salary rate, because that also says, okay, you might not be earning less than the minimum, but you might be earning less than the market. So again, they don't want us employers to be tempted to hire cheaper labor in other countries to the detriment of Australian salaries. So this, again, the media doesn't talk about this and how this is really safeguarding Australian workers, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
Another safeguard measure for Australian workers is the requirement for labor market testing. Labor market testing is a pain for everyone involved because unfortunately at the moment it's just window dressing. And that's what I was talking about before. So the government wants to check that employers at least tried finding a local to fill that position. And they do that by requiring 28 days of ads posted online for the position to be filled. Even if you already found your person and that person is a foreigner and you've decided you're going to sponsor that person, we need to post ads for you for 28 days in free websites where you don't have to spend money with this, but then you need to fill some applications. And if you find someone who could fill that position, we need to know what is wrong with that person. So again, what we've been seeing at the moment is the job market is so hot for job seekers that our clients are not getting that many applications. And when they do get an application that's suitable, it's not that hard to explain why they still prefer the foreigner. So, but we've also had clients who ended up hiring two people, the foreigner and an Australian who applied and
because
was
they
amazing.
end up finding someone. Yeah.
Is it possible to hire two IT developers because I need people and this guy just showed up? Yes. And that's what this exercise is all about, trying to find a local, not to just fill that position, but also, to grow the business.
So what we suggest our clients is always, and it goes back again to that initial approach when I started the presentation, which is, if we're going to do this, as dreadful as it is, let's do this with a purpose, right? So do it. Okay, we understand you're not hiring anyone, but if you're going to do this exercise, do it properly, because you may find someone that you're not willing to offer the position now, but you can put on your database and maybe contact that person down the track. So that's what we try to do.
All righty. Now, caveats were also introduced to strengthen the process. There's a genuine requirement where we really need to, again, explain why the business needs someone in that position. And even obvious things, I had to explain why this company needed this accountant. They were an IT software company, but he's helping with the implementation. Some companies are restricted if they're turning over less than $1 million for some occupations. So for example, general manager, there's a high salary and the company needs to be turning over $1 million. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense why, a small cafe needs a general manager. One thing that it's a pain for everyone, but that was implemented in 2018 and unfortunately is here to stay, is the Skilling Australians Fund. The Skilling Australians Fund was implemented as a measure to show the media, in my opinion, that the government's doing something to address the problem that we have. Because what is the problem here? There aren't enough skilled people in the country to fill all vacancies. So relying on hiring foreigners, especially on a temporary visa, is just a band-aid. On a permanent visa, like this company yesterday did, we got this guy in, and he's going to be in the job force until he retires, and he's only 30. So this is a long-term solution, right? But the majority of employers only sponsor temporarily. So to address this problem, in long reach, they created the Skilling Australians Fund, where anyone who wants to sponsor a foreigner on a temporary or permanent visa needs to make this payment. And this payment sits on a bucket. And this bucket supposedly is used to fund especially vocational apprenticeships. We don't know where this money is. We don't know how this money is going to be used, but there are some stats out there saying that it's being used for apprenticeships. Now, the problem here is if it's only used for apprenticeships, what happens to professionals? What happens to accountants, IT people, physiotherapists? We're still needing those professionals. So I don't know. And this is a question around the whole migration industry. We don't know if this is the solution, but this is what we have to deal with right now.
Yeah.
And where it's got a range there of 1,200 to 7,200, how does that work? How do I know what I'm going to kind of pay there?
Sure. So if we're looking at a temporary visa, that's a 482, that depends on your annual turnover and the number of years you're nominating that person for. Depending on the case, and that's actually the next slide, I think. Depending on the profession, the occupation, employers are able to nominate to up to 4 years, whereas others only 2 years, with the option to extend for another 2. So your turnover as a company or a sole trader times the number of years you're nominating will determine the price. So if you're turning over less than $10 million a year, the price per year is $1,200. Now, if you're a company turning over more than $10 million a year, that goes up to 1,800. So that's the unit price, 1,200 or 1,800. Yeah. That times the number of years that you want to nominate someone will give you that total figure. Now, another problem with this is if you are going to nominate someone, you need to pay this upfront, and you don't know if your application will be approved. And if it is refused, you never see the money again. So there's again a very contagious discussion going on where the migration agents industry, we've been asking the Department of Immigration to charge this at the time of decision and only if the application will be approved, because this sometimes can be a deterrent to a number of employers. But at the moment, it's charged at the time of the application. So again, of course, we believe in the importance of working with a professional, but more than ever, you need a migration agent to prepare that application for you. And first and foremost, to check if you qualify, because we see a lot of employers who do this themselves. And when they come to us with a refusal, we say, you should never have applied in the first place, either because your worker doesn't qualify or your position doesn't make sense in your business, or you didn't do labor market testing properly. So by working with a professional migration agent, you know that the chances of a refusal are being really minimized. And again, I don't want to beat on our own drum, but already doing that. It's the same with any professional services. You're really investing on an outcome. And even though we're not selling the outcome, we're there holding your hand throughout the whole thing. So yeah.
And there's some on those fees as well that maybe someone here will end up asking this question. But how about if you sponsor someone for 4 years and the person leaves the company on the second year? So in those situations, we can ask for a refund of the incomplete, the unused years that the payment was made towards. So if the person works for two and a half years, but you've paid for 4 years, you can claim 2 years back.
Yeah.
So anything that is unused, a full year unused, you can claim that money back. But for some reason, if it is refused, you can't.
Yeah.
So,
okay. And so what if they, after 2 years, they then become accepted as a permanent resident? Can we refund that extra 2 years that we might have paid?
Technically, you could ask for that, but
you could, because you have to pay again as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you nominate a worker for permanent visa, there's the Skilling Australians Fund is there as well, and it's either a one-off payment of $3,000 or $5,000. So yeah, so some of our clients, when they nominate their workers onto a permanent visa, they seek that refund. I'm not sure how successful that is. The department has been finding a lot of creative ways in saying, no, we won't refund you. So the legality of that is still under discussion. And I believe some of our clients have a case to pursue that. But yeah.
But the secret here, Ben, and again, it's to do it strategically.
Yeah.
Because what we do is when we see a situation like this with a client of ours, a corporate client, what we discuss is, how many years do you need? One, do you want to support this application for a permanent visa? If the employer says yes, and of course, provided the relationship works out during that time, we are going to suggest and strategize in a way that you're going to spend only the necessary for that person to fulfill the requirements for the permanent visa, so you don't pay any extra. So again, the importance of thinking strategically from beginning to end of the process, because otherwise, as Erica said, yes, some people may pursue the refund, but the government, first, they delay a lot the response, and a lot of the times they come back, unless it's in that particular circumstance where the person leaves the company. I'm inclined to say that it's very difficult to get any other refund other than under those circumstances. So
Yeah.
you need to plan ahead exactly what's going to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, the majority of the people who can proceed to a permanent visa after being sponsored on a temporary one will have to work for that employer for 3 years. So even if they can get a 4-year visa, if the workers already made clear they want PR and the employer is okay with that, we'll say to the employer, don't pay for 4 years. Let's just get the 3 years and go from there, and you save a year there. So we look at all those things.
Yeah.
Another important thing we do is we check the candidate before the employer goes and spends money with them. So we establish relationships where we have clients, and even if there's no relationship, if an employer approaches us and says, I'm looking at sponsoring someone, we say, okay, can we have a look at that person? And we actually start from there, because if the person doesn't meet the minimum requirements for the visa approval, there's no point in discussing the business situation or where the business is, nothing like that. So then we don't waste the employer's time. We look at the person's qualifications, their work experience, their English level, and we even check if they have criminal record, if they have any health issues, because that might affect the application. The visa expenses all can be paid by the worker. So whatever they spend, they can include their spouses and dependent children. So the more family members, the more it costs for the visa application fee. But you as the employer, you don't need to pay for this. So this can be a cost that is transferred to the employee.
And it's usually what happens.
Just to be clear on that, which expense is this?
So this is the visa application
Okay.
itself. So going back to the 3 steps,
Yep.
We have a business sponsorship approval that stays valid for 5 years.
Yep.
We have the nomination approval for each occupation the business is nominating, and a visa. So the business must cover all costs related to step 1 and 2.
And cannot
under
be
Section 245 of the Migration Act.
And cannot be reimbursed on that one. Is that correct?
Sorry?
And they cannot be reimbursed.
Legally, no. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of our clients, and this is a section of the act that was introduced in 2015, if I remember correctly. Before then, the visa applicants could pay for everything. So that they use this as leverage in a lot of times where a company was undecided between a local and a foreigner for a position. And they would say, we like you, we think you're the best candidate, but there's all this red tape and costs involved in getting you to work with us. At which occasion the visa applicant would say, I can cover all the costs, I really want to work for you, and I want to stay in Australia. That has been made unlawful with Section 245 in a lot of cases, it was just, someone saying, yeah, I'm the right person for the job and I'm happy to pick up this bill. But a lot of employers were using this to exploit people, and it created a black market of sponsorship visas, which now we hope doesn't exist anymore. But then again, we're sure there's people still doing it behind the curtains somewhere. But legally, only step 3 can be covered by the employee. But that's the most expensive step anyway. The visa fees can be quite hefty. That's the cheapest one for a 2-year visa. Someone who can get a 4-year visa pays almost $3,000 per adult. Plus there's the kids. Some people in the country need to pay an extra $700 per person. There's health checks. So at least this is something employers don't need to cover, but all the rest must be covered by them.
Yeah.
In terms of the good occupations, meaning those that are in the high demand list and that can get a 4-year visa, which is less headache for an employer, get a visa going and that's it. And most importantly, they can proceed to a permanent visa if the person and the employer agree on that. It's an extensive list, but we picked up the usual suspects, the most popular ones. So again, nurses and doctors and physiotherapists, all the health occupations are here, occupational therapists as well. We have chefs, and that's the only occupation in hospitality that's in high demand. Restaurant managers are not.
You can still sponsor people as restaurant managers, but they don't turn into a permanent visa.
Yeah, we'll get to that on the next slide. Construction project managers, architects, and people in the high echelons of construction. All IT professionals in terms of developers and engineers, not so many in terms of hardware and support. Those guys are in the other list. All engineering occupations, teachers, only early childhood and secondary. Don't ask me why, but primary teachers are not there and haven't been for a while. The majority of tradespeople, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, motor mechanics, locksmiths, a number of painters, welders, air conditioning mechanics, they're all in high demand. Yeah. Multimedia specialist is one of those occupations. We can get a web designer, a social media manager, a number of people under that. And management consultant is the only business-focused occupation other than accountants and economists that is in high demand.
Okay, cool.
2 years, as Michelle said, we can still get people sponsored, but they won't get to PR unless they find another way themselves. If they're single and they end up starting a relationship and end up getting a family visa, otherwise they might have to move to a regional area, which is something we're going to quickly talk about. So marketing professionals, sales professionals, some IT people, primary teachers, journalists, event managers, restaurant managers, recruiting, etc. Now, when we say the government killed the 457 visa, but everything remains the same, one of the only problems we've had is this thing that only those who are in the MLT SSL, or the medium and long-term skilled shortage list, the high demand list, only these people can get PR via a business nomination. Before, with the 457, anyone could. If you were a cook, a massage therapist, or a scientist, if you found work in Australia and your employer sponsored you on the 457 visa, you could progress onto a permanent visa. And that meant Australia was competitive with in terms of the world as a region to come and work. Because you're not going to uproot your whole family, come here on a temporary visa and not get PR later. You want to stay if it works out. Unfortunately, now only certain occupations can do that. So that happened in 2017, and we saw a number of people leaving. Lots of executives left. So there was a big hoo-ha. Now, those people at least have the option of the 494 visa. Like I said, if you're not in Brisbane, you're not in Sydney, you're not in Melbourne, all occupations can get, instead of a 482 TSS visa, a 494 regional sponsorship visa. And anyone who gets that visa after 3 years can get a permanent visa. So if you're not in Brisbane, if you're not in Sydney, if you're not in Melbourne, that's the visa you should be sponsoring people on, because you're going to be more attractive to the worker if you say, look, at the end, if you want PR, here's an opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. And sorry, we don't have too much time left. Sorry, Erica.
Sure, that's all right. We talked about the 186 permanent visa. So either you can do like our clients and recruit from overseas if people are in demand and bring them directly on a permanent visa, or they stay with you sponsored for 3 years and later you nominate them. Other options are the training visa and short-term visa that Michelle covered. 494 is the regional visa. Some regions have an extra option, which is the labor agreement with the government. Most of the visas are taking a long time to process, as Michelle said. But if that occupation is on the priority skilled migration occupation list, that can happen quicker, like my client yesterday.
And so how long did that one take, for instance?
That took 9 months, but it could have taken less if his occupation was there since the beginning. So accountants just came in April. Was it April? No, last month in June. As soon as the accountant occupation came into the priority list, that occupation had been sitting there for 8 months. As soon as it came in, it was processed in less than a month.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's much quicker. I had an IT professional, which had been there, and it was approved in 2 weeks for a permanent visa.
And I brought a doctor on a temporary visa with travel exemption approved in 3 weeks as well. So,
okay. Geez.
But you need to think strategically. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Well, at least the department's got a little bit more brains than they had a few months ago. That's not too crass to say, but anyway, some of this stuff.
No, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's it. Well, if any of our attendees do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box or the Q&A box. But yeah, I just want to really thank you both for joining today. And there's a few people who did join partway through the webinar, and we will have a recording going out as well.
Fantastic.
Just so you can see that full webinar. But yeah, I guess how would we get in touch with you if we wanted to have that chat you mentioned? I think Michelle, you mentioned yeah, cool.
There we go. Easy peasy.
Awesome. So there's the email address on the screen at the moment.
Do you want to talk about it, Michelle?
Yeah. So essentially, guys, it's super easy. Either send us an email or give us a call. The phone number is not there, is it? It's 02. We're based in Sydney, our headquarters. We have an office in Adelaide as well. The phone number is 0292166600.
Apologies for that. It's missing.
No, that's okay. But then otherwise, send us an email, visas@bravomigration.com.au. Just briefly give us your contact details, your phone number, talk very briefly about your business. We'll set up a free consult. It's usually 30 minutes to 1 hour consult, but in 30 minutes, we can go through all the details. So all we do during the consult is essentially understand what you're after. We will ask you a few questions about your business and what you want to do, what type of applicant you want to bring in. If you already have someone in mind, it would be great to send us the resume for that person and passport if possible. Otherwise, just the resume is fine, because then we have a super productive conversation. We look into your business. We look into the visa applicant's requirements and all the background. And then at that point in time, guys, we can tell you whether we can do this or not. And if we can, then obviously, depending on the circumstances of the applicant,
the conversation goes.
Yeah, we'll send you a quote. We'll send you all the breakdown. And again, no commitment. I think it's very important to tell you this. There's no commitment. We'll have a chat, see how we go about it. And, if we can do business together, fantastic. If not, at least you're going to come out of the conversation smarter in this sense than you were before.
And sometimes the no is very important, so you don't spend any time or money in a project that may not have results. So knowing if your employee qualifies or not at the front end, and your business and the position, then super important.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All righty. Well, thanks again. And we're here for maybe another minute or two if there are any questions that come through. Otherwise, I think that is the end of our webinar.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for inviting us, Ben, and thanks for everyone watching.
Awesome. Same for me here. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Music cranking.